Assalamu alaikum, dear
Walaikum
Facebook
assalam.
world and my honorable guest. So we are also here today. The last week on Thursday, we have started one very important live program with important topic with our honorable guest. So according to Islamic prospectus, we try to learn new things every now and then. Research is always going on. So many things in Islam. It's completely, we don't know. We need to know something new. And some of the things was before we know one way. Now we, after researching, we know the another way. So Islam always give us new knowledge. I mean, the knowledge is complete knowledge is Islam, but according to our research, we find it the new way. So that's why it's our obligation, our duty also. We want to, whatever we want to know something, we want to spread it through for the others also. So this program arranged by Suprabhat Sydney. Suprabhat Sydney, this is a local newspaper, Bangladeshi community newspaper. We published its last 10 years. And face-to-face live TV, it's almost 2 years we are running. Our honorable guest every time comes and they talk with the different important topic for our community and for our people. So this continuous program, last week we did the part 1 and today is the part 2 and another part 2 also will be finished the next 2 weeks. So it's totally 4 parts. So our honorable guest is today, Dr. Jan Ali. I told you before also about Dr. Jan Ali. And today also I'm going to, again, who are new today with us, introducing you. Dr. Jan Ali is a senior lecturer in Islam and Modernity, the Department of Language in IIT and TSOL, the Western Sydney University. Dr. Jan Ali is a religious sociologist specializing in Islam. So he is learning Islam and he is teaching Islam. He is researching on Islam. He has so much contribution in this age to develop the Islamic knowledge is transformed to the students in researching level in the university. So we are very lucky that we got him in our face-to-face live program. And it's also, our community people also lucky they can get the current knowledge from him. He has written so many books on research. He has written one book is Islam and Muslims in Australia. So we talked about these books also before time. If you go, dear audience, to our YouTube channel, you can see, you can learn so many things about these books. I have bought these books before starting the live and I read it also. It's amazing books to learn about the Muslims' contribution in the Australia. When Muslim came before the white generation, Muslims came before, and they have a lot of contribution in Australia. So it's not like that they did everything in Australia. We have come before and we are following them. It's not like that. Actually, they our Muslims people also have the great contribution for the socialization in this modernity. Also, Islam in the West and Islamic revelation encounters the modern world about the Tabligh Jamaat. So different kinds of book, different kinds of publication is published in the different places all over the world. And I welcome to Dr. Jan to our studio. We are very happy to see you here again. And we say you thank you from Sydney and from our community. Assalamu alaikum. How are you today?
Walaikum assalam. I'm fine, Brother Muhammad. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thank you very much for having me to do this presentation today.
Our topics is that organ transplantation according to the Islam. So according to your research based, we have learned so many things from your first part. So today is the day part as we talked before, part 2. So I think I am requesting you to give in details about the part 2 for me and for our community people and for all over the Muslim people all over the world. I request you to start your talking.
So I'll just share my slide. Okay. Okay. So thank you very much again, Brother Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. So today I'm going to talk about two different perspectives on organ transplantation in Islam, also provide a background before I actually start talking about those two perspectives, which will be in part 3 and part 4. So today is part 2, moving on from introduction to actually exploring the two perspectives, or a background to those two perspectives, which I will be talking in the following 2 weeks. Just to start, I just want to recap from my last week's work. And so let me, okay. Okay, so last week I provided a definition, if you like, about organ transplantation. What exactly is it? So in medical terms, organ transplantation is a surgical procedure involving the removal of a failing organ or damaged organ caused by what is in medical terms called refractory disease or injury from the human body, and replacing it with a working organ, or retrieving the organ from a human body, whether that be deceased or living, into a body that requires organ transplantation for it to survive and continue existence. And then I spoke about three types of organ transplantation, if you like. So there's autograft or auto transplantation, which is a surgical procedure wherein an organ, a tissue, or sometimes both, from one part of the body is transplanted to another part in the same body or in the same individual. Allograft or allotransplantation is a transplantation process of organs, tissues, or cells from a genetically non-identical donor of the same species, so human species, to a recipient, for instance, a heart from Mr. White to Mr. Black. So this is within the same species, in this case, human species. Now, xenograft is opposite to that, or xenotransplantation, which is a surgical procedure where organs or tissues are removed from one living species to another. For example, a heart valve removed from a monkey and transplanted to a human body. Now the two key perspectives, I think, history. So also I mentioned about organ transplantation being practiced in the past. So the information we have, based on that, the first detailed description of repairing damaged organs such as nose or ears using autografts from close by skin and surgically replacing the damaged nose is found in an ancient Sanskrit text on medicine and surgery called the Susruta Sanhita. That's BC 600. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, and North and South American surgeons transplanted teeth. Arab medical practitioners mastered this technique over 1,000 years ago. So again, transplantation has been practiced in the past. Around the middle of the last century, in 1950s, that the organ transplantation procedures showed signs of greater success when surgeons were able to successfully graft an organ from person donor to person recipient. So for us in our modern century or in modern times, we can go as far back as 1950s to see how organ transplantation started to take place. But when it comes to Muslims, Muslim jurists sanctioned transplantation of teeth and bones, which had been practiced by Muslim surgeons for over 1,000 years. So we do have evidence in Islam that organ transplantation did take place. But I think one thing I want to make it clear is that the organ transplantation that takes place today with improved medical and technological knowledge and resources makes organ transplantation somewhat different as a process from past organ transplantation. So the transplantation of organs such as heart, kidney, pancreas is a very new phenomenon, if you like, in the context of organ transplantation more broadly. So that was a bit of a recap. Now let me actually talk about today's topic, which is to look at the two key perspectives. Sorry. Yeah. So what we find today is that scholars actually talk about organ transplantation from different perspectives. And these perspectives can be actually categorized into two main ones. So the discourse about organ transplantation and donation in Islam is, if you like, very technical. It's varied and diametrically opposite to each other. And therefore, we don't find in the literature on organ transplantation in Islam a consensus on organ donation and transplantation. That is, whether it is permissible or not. You will find in the literature on organ transplantation in Islam two distinct prevailing schools of thought under which organ transplantation is generally talked about by scholars in contemporary Muslim contexts. It is worth mentioning, I suppose, and some of you might already know, that the two great texts of Islam, the Quran and Hadith, doesn't talk about organ transplantation. And so the Islamic scripture or scriptures, Quran and Hadith, are silent on the matter. And so how do we know whether organ transplantation is permissible or not? And that is what I'm trying to do today before I go into each school of thought, which will be week 3 and 4, to talk more in depth about different perspectives. In Islam, it is been said by scholars that every human life is very valuable, and therefore killing anyone is not permissible. And if one kills someone, it is as if one has killed the entire humanity. And on the other hand, if one saves someone, it is as if the entire humanity has been saved. The Quran says that, and do not kill the soul which God has forbidden to be killed except by legal right. That is that killing can only be done by the political authority, that is by the state custodians such as the caliph or the government. And it is an allegory, a metaphor, when we find scholars saying and the Quran saying that when you save a life, it is as if you have saved the humanity. If you kill a person, as if you have killed the entire humanity. This is in the context of illegal killing. Illegal killing would be murder, for example, but legal killing would be if someone has murdered someone, and if in that country they have got capital punishment, and the court will determine the outcome, and if the outcome is that the person is guilty, and therefore the state or the political authority will actually have that process taken, process to be enacted by appropriate individuals or appropriate department. Human life in Islam is treated equally, and there is no privileging of Muslim life or discriminating against non-Muslim life. In other words, human life is equally valid whether one is a Muslim or not. And Quran states, and I quote, "And we have certainly honored the children of Adam and carried them on the land and sea and provided for them of the good things and preferred them over much of what we have created with definite preference." So Allah in the Quran says in chapter 17, verse 70, that He actually has created human beings as a much better creation than other creations that He have created. So there is a privileging of humans over many, many creations that we have in this universe. Okay, so as humans, human life is precious, valuable in Islam. As I said, Muslim or non-Muslim. So then is equally precious is human dignity. And dignity of even a dead person is very important in Islam. What I'm trying to suggest here is that human dignity, when it comes to human dignity, how human being should be treated when he or she is alive should also be given the same dignified treatment of a dead person, whether a male or female, whether Muslim or a non-Muslim. And so respecting a person or people is very important in Islam and is a very important teaching of Islam that is derived from the Quran and Hadith. So according to Islamic teaching, human beings neither have absolute control over their lives nor ownership over their bodies. I mean, this is quite obvious, isn't it? We have got very limited control over our lives and over our body. For example, we cannot stop the finger nails from growing. We cannot stop hair from growing. We cannot stop age from growing, so forth and so on. So we have got very little control, although we might think that we have got a lot of control. This is a bit of an illusion. So as such, humans must take all precautions and every step to preserve body inviolability. In other words, we should not mistreat our body. And again, that is whether we're talking about a live body or a dead body. Body is, human beings are Allah's creation according to Islamic teaching, and It is something that is an amana, something that is given to us to keep in safe protection and look after it. We don't own it. And it's a very important lesson here that when we actually borrow something from someone, or if we have um, someone else's property in our possession, we know that Islam teaches, and this is always being reiterated by scholars, that um, that property should be given the utmost care because it is someone else's, and if you mistreat it, misuse it, you are liable for it. And similar uh, situation also comes into action when we're talking about human body, that it is not something that we own, it is something that Allah has given us and given instructions how to manage it. And so that should be borne in mind every time we actually um, treat our body in certain ways. Okay, so what do scholars say? Contemporary Muslim scholars and fuqahas, the jurists, employ what we might call the fiqh or Islamic Sharia sources, legal sources, or jurisprudential tool known as ijtihad to actually deliberate on the question of organ transplantation. Just to give a bit of an idea about Islamic law or Sharia. Islamic law or Sharia has got 5 sources. Orthodoxically speaking, and these 5 sources are in Sunni Islam, particularly Quran, first and foremost, followed by Hadith, followed by Qiyas, which is analogical deduction, and Ijma, which is scholarly consensus, and Ijtihad, that's independent of scholarly reasoning or juristic interpretation of a particular situation or a particular legal principle. And so the scholars use these sources and deliberate on the issue of body organ transplantation, body violation or in violation. And that is how we learn whether organ transplantation is permissible in Islam or not. And not from the Quran or Hadith, but from various other sources. And what I call these sources is as follows. I call Quran the principal source or divine source. And with that, Hadith also as part of that divine source. Qiyas, Ijma, and Ijtihad, I categorize these into human sources. So we have got 2 types of sources within the Sharia legal framework. As to 2 great texts of Islam, as I mentioned earlier, they are silent on the issue of organ transplantation. So Muslim scholars and jurists start their discussion based on this assumption that there is a deliberation on the issue of organ donation and transplantation, which are informed and undertaken in good faith, which Allah wants His faithfuls to observe and agrees upon. In other words, Muslim scholars with good intention, with good faith, will always try to do good, and Allah is happy with that. So this is the principle that scholars actually refer to when they say that scholars are entitled to deliberate on the issue of organ transplantation and donation. So they use Quran and Hadith to explain related concepts and abstract topics, such as transplanting God's property or ownership of the human body, human dignity, body intrusion or prohibition of mutilation, and human rights for deliberative purposes, for decision-making purposes. Religious proofs based on Quran and Hadith or on Islamic principles have been used to argue both for and against particular positions in reference to organ transplantation. And I will actually talk in some detail when I'm talking about those two perspectives, in favor of organ transplantation perspective and against organ transplantation perspective, in the following 2 weeks. These are complex and abstract concepts requiring very systematic, critical, analytical analysis and very careful decision-making process, given scholars' own understanding and perspectival proclivity. There are inevitably many interpretive challenges as well as plural interpretations. What I mean by this is that because scholars have environmental influence upon them, social influences upon them, cultural influences upon them, there are many challenges they face when they deliberate on the question of organ transplantation, and encounter numerous interpretive challenges. And they have to negotiate through all this to come to a decision that is in the best interest of everyone, and is not self-interested decision. Thus, in a decision-making process based on the directives of interpretation and Islamic legal maxims, that is, principles, the scholars and jurists exercise their legal discretionary power, which is ijtihad, as I mentioned, as the fifth source of Islamic law, to arrive at a decision, and as a result, the prevalence of multiple opinions on organ donation and transplantation. Because scholars are open to legal discretionary powers, which is ijtihad, and we have different scholars, and they are influenced by different environmental situations, as I just mentioned, it is inevitable that they will come to a different or differing conclusions and differing interpretations, and therefore differing decisions on organ transplantation. So this is why we have got at least two main positions on organ transplantation. So I'm trying to give you a bit of background as to why we have two perspectives on organ transplantation, rather than simply just going into these two different perspectives, which readers and listeners might find difficulty digesting if they don't have the background. So according to some scholars, the two prevailing positions on organ donation and transplantation are geographically and nationally based or divided. So these two perspectives that I'm going to talk to you about in the following 2 weeks, one perspective that favors organ transplantation and the other one that says organ transplantation is prohibited in Islam, you will find that one perspective, the perspectives, these two perspectives are influenced geographically and nationally. So the geographical and national divide can be drawn between the subcontinent Muslim scholars, particularly from Hanafi school of jurisprudential thought that is based mainly within the dominant four Sunni schools of religious law: Hanafism, Shafiism, Hanbalism, and Malikism. This Hanafi school of jurisprudential thought based on Deoband Seminary in India, which is the largest seminary in the subcontinent. And on the other hand, Arab Muslim scholars, many of whom follow one of the following Sunni legal schools: Shafiism, Malikism, and Hanbalism. So Deobandi seminary scholars majority of them follow Hanafism, and they are located in Deoband in India. And the Arab Muslim scholars are divided in their legal following based on Shafiism, Malikism, and Hanbalism. It is difficult to say whether there are majority Malikis or majority Hanbalis or majority Shafi. The literature is a bit vague, but I will hazard the guess that the Arab Muslim scholars who take a position on organ transplantation are largely Shafi-based Muslim scholars. So it can be said that Muslim scholars and jurists who are located in the Arabic-speaking part of the world, who are thought to give priority to living over spirituality, which is described as anthropocentric, which means that the focus is on human beings rather than on Allah or God. So this view generally consent to the permissibility of organ donation and transplantation. You hopefully are getting a bit of an idea now that why a particular perspective has got a particular position. As I mentioned here, the two key geographical areas have got a lot to say in terms of what perspective the scholars actually prescribe to, whether that be in favor or against organ donation. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but you might draw some conclusions on these two geographical divide and which group favors what. So various examples are testimony to this assertion. For instance, in 1959, Sheikh Hassan Mamoun, the then Grand Mufti of Egypt, offered the first fatwa in the modern times endorsing organ donation, sanctioning corneal transplantation from cadavers, that is the dead body, and from those who consented to organ donation upon their death. And so that's fatwa number 1084, dated on 14 April 1959. And that can be found in the Al-Fatah Al-Misriya, 1982. And in 1982, the Supreme Council of the Ulama in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, actually approved organ harvest and transplantation when considered medically necessary. And that is in the report of the Senior Ulama Commission, 1982, particularly page 46. In 1986, the Islamic Fiqh Council of the Organization of Islamic Council in Amman, Jordan, delivered a ruling, and this ruling is this was on 3rd of July 86 in favor of organ donation, both from a cadaver and living person. So they said that organ transplantation is permissible by taking organ or organs from a cadaver, which is a dead person, or even a living person, for example, kidney. In 1988, the resolution reached by the International Islamic Fiqh Academy of Jeddah led to the Saudi government officially endorsing organ transplantation. And you will find this in evidence of this in the works published by my colleague Mansour Ali and his colleague Maravia last year. Those living particularly in the subcontinent, where around a third of Muslim population reside, it has been said, argued that spirituality takes priority over living, and they harbor a theocentric, which is God as the central focus in human living, and therefore subscribe against organ donation and transplantation. So you can see that those who subscribe to organ donation and transplantation, who actually are largely from Arab-speaking countries, are people who take an anthropocentric view, which is that life is all about living, and in that process, human beings are the central figure. And whatever needs to be done to actually pursue that and fulfill that ought to be done. So if one needs an organ to continue living, and if there is an organ available, they say that individuals can take that, do transplantation. In this perspective, in the subcontinent or in a theocentric perspective, where God is the central focus or the God is the central figure, and the understanding here is that life is all about serving Allah. And if life has actually encountered difficulty, such as a failed organ, so be it. You have to continue serving Allah whichever way you can. And once you can't do that anymore, well, that's the end of it. But there is an important focus here, which is Allah himself, not the individual. So this position is reflected in the following examples. In the late 1960s, a number of Pakistani scholar jurists with links to Deoband Seminary arrived at the decision that organ transplantation was not permissible in Islam. And I quote, "None is owner of his life and parts of the body, therefore neither can he sell it nor can gift to anyone. Such dealings are wrong and invalid." So that's in Darul Ifta 2020, Fatwa 1138/982. That's Hijri 1429. So organ giving and receiving are prohibited. In another quote, this opinion was held by Muhammad Shafi, former Chief Mufti of Darul Ulum Deoband, India. And more information is available in the works of Ali and Maravia, particularly their work published in 2020, but I think there are a few other works they've published. And Muhammad Shafi Uthmani, former Grand Mufti of Pakistan, advised against organ transplantation as it is a process which undermines the station of human beings in the divinely created universal system. So these are the two positions, if you like, that I'm going to talk in some detail in the following 2 weeks. So it can be posited that, or argued that, the rationale for two separate positions on organ transplantation in Islam continues to um, be so due to different sets of explanation or rationalization offered by the two opposing schools of thought. The subcontinent Muslim scholars are largely influenced by Deobandi seminary, which is based on Hanafi school. Observe that Hanafi school of jurisprudential thought have always been deemed among the most flexible, liberal, and rational in Islamic law of jurisprudence, and is very influential in South and Central Asia. Theologically, Deobandis subscribe to the doctrine of taqlid, which is conformity to legal precedent, and are relatively free from any state influence, despite being located in the world's largest democracy, which is India. Deobandis have their own worldview based on their own interpretation and understanding of Islam and remain aloof from modern value system. This is a very important point. And Arab Muslim scholars, however, are very diverse, particularly jurisprudentially, as I mentioned earlier, Shafi'ism, Hanafism, and Malikism, and are vulnerable to state influence and intervention. In the Arab world, there is at least some level of interaction between the state and religion, and as states are modern nation states, the influence and dominance of modern worldview is pervasive. So that was it. And so in conclusion, what I want to say is that you will see in the next 2 weeks, when I go into some depth about each perspective, what are their justifications for taking a position, whether that be in favor of organ transplantation or against organ transplantation. And what I've spoken to you about today is a background information to understanding those two key perspectives that I'm going to talk to you in the following 2 weeks. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that was informative. Inshallah, I will explain a bit more in the following couple of weeks. But in the meanwhile, please feel free to read a bit more so that you can get a more detailed information about organ transplantation in the literature. Thank you very much, Brother Mohammed, and thank you very much for Supravit.
Alhamdulillah, and thank you, Dr. Jan. You have described so many things, from a lot of references with everything about the transplantation. One thing I have heard that the give priority to living our spirituality. Someone says give priority to spirituality, some over the living. Actually, this is the fact, this unresolving the matter. What should we do? Okay, so we are learning so many things. I think, dear audience, you also have learned about the transplantation, so many things. And whatever you have a question, so you can make the question and you can send to us. From our next session, we can give you the answer. Our guest will give you the answer with the references. I think it's a very interesting and very important matter for the Muslim Ummah. So we have a chance also the next 2 weeks for about discussing about the thing. So dear audience, if you have any discussion, any question or anything else, or if you would like to have a share with you any kinds of knowledge or references also with us, you can send us email or SMS. We will try to discuss about the matter also for resolving this matter. So thank you very much, Dr. Jan, for coming to our studio.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think last week I sent you a link with the journal